order so we can hopefully have a short meeting tonight. Call this meeting of the Highland Park Rent Control Board meeting. It is 5:36 on Thursday, April 24th. And here's our OPMA statement. This meeting is called to order in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Notice of this meeting was provided to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Highland Park Planet on January 21st, 2025. It was posted on the borough website at www.hpborough.com and on the bulletin board at Borough Hall, 221 South Fifth Avenue, Highland Park, New Jersey, and has remained continuously posted as required by law. So the first order of business we have is the approval of the minutes from March 27th. I think there may be some motions to amend here.
There was a correction, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, I had a correction.
But so motion to amend.
Second.
Do you want to say what it is?
It stated that I included 3 families and it was only owner occupied 2 families, of which I don't know how many there are, but I doubt that there are more than 20.
Apologize about that.
So this is for the section under exemptions, right? For single family homes, it's owner occupied 2 and 3 family apartments, but you had just wanted 2 families, not 3
and not 2 families, only owner occupied 2 families.
Owner occupied 2 families.
Got it.
Can we get that?
My good friend Jared thought that I included myself in that, but I am not an owner occupied 2 families.
Right. So since we are motioning to amend at this point, any objections? That's fair. We were all here.
This is the minutes.
Right, there's the minutes.
Yeah.
Yep, these are the minutes.
You're gonna amend the
Minutes.
To reflect, because we attributed
to
3 families to
correction.
Diane, and she's saying
Right.
that wasn't what she said.
Okay.
Any objection to this amendment? Okay, see none, motion carries. So we will have that amendment to the minutes. Any other amendments? All right, see none. Can I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Sorry I'm late. The traffic was.
Yeah, we just started.
You know, it's Murphy's Law, right? Like I left, I was like, oh, I gave myself like 45 minutes to get here and it was only a 20-minute drive. So of course it took
I am
55 minutes, you know.
walking Murphy's Law over here.
So,
All in favor of approving the minutes from March 27, 2025?
Aye.
Those any opposed? Abstentions? I'll abstain. Motion carries. Approval of the minutes from March 27th have been approved. So we have no resolutions on the table. This moves us to our only order of business for the night besides public comment, which is discussion of the memo that was written up that includes our recommendations that we had discussed from last time. Most of us were present, but if others have comments that maybe didn't make it into this memo, I think we want to take a careful look at it. Hope everyone was able to do that before the meeting. And then Jared, give you a chance to weigh in since you were not with us last time. So I will open the floor to any discussion on this memo.
I don't have any comments.
Yeah. There's a tiny typo, but I will share that with Terry.
Jake. Jake.
Diane, did you want to amend this? I think you were the one that had brought this up and the exemption from the minutes did make it into this memo. Is that something you want to edit out of the memo then, or?
Yeah, definitely.
We get a motion to amend?
What are we amending?
So the same thing that was in the minutes that Diane just amended what she had actually said in the minutes. It was reflected here in the memo too, and so I'm offering her an
Oh, with
opportunity.
the memo? I don't have the memo in front of me, so it also.
The memo is right there.
The memo, but not, the memo is different than the minutes, right? It's different than the ordinance. This is just the memo.
Mhm.
And the memo is going to,
The Borough Council.
and we're approving this
Giving it to Stephanie.
memo. Sorry, do I should raise my hand and ask these questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
So anything
And I
in
got
this
you next
memo that has exemptions is going to be then transcribed and incorporated into the ordinance?
Terry, go ahead.
That's a good question. The intent of the memo, it's addressed to you from Jake. He took, the feedback from the meetings and the public and tried to kind of summarize where we thought the issues were. the intent of this memo is it'll be basically converted into a memo that basically from the rent control board to the borough council, more specifically Stephanie's committee, which happens to be the finance committee, because that's where this item falls under. And it'll be up to them to kind of look at it. And when you read the memo, you'll see it's not presenting a unified front on each of these items. It was like there was a range of opinions on these various items, and we're encouraging the council to consider amendments like this. They will look at that, and if there's items that they do want to implement, with the help of our attorney, we'll incorporate them into the ordinance, and it'll go through the normal ordinance, amendment procedure through committee to the full council for discussion, and then to a vote in public hearing. So this is basically attempting to capture the range of opinions on these we kind of narrowed it down, I guess, to these items, kind of as the core areas of interest, and that to get that to be to relay this information to the council, and then it's pretty much in their hands as to what to do with that information at this point.
Go ahead, Jared.
So I understand. Okay, so as I spoke with Diane before this, this memo, there's a couple things in here that I completely disagree with. So, but that I can put any exemption or idea I want on here, like as an individual board member, then that gets inserted into the memo, which then gets brought up. It's not, we don't all agree on what the exemptions are.
We decided since it's not our job to make the policy, we decided that rather than trying to come to a consensus here, which doesn't make sense because we're not the council and we're not the ones that are making that we would share, not just ours, by the way, but also public comment. We have members of the public here that have spoken at multiple meetings, and we made sure that those what was expressed in public comment was also reflected in this memo that will go to the council. So thank you to those of you that have shared in public comment and know that we've heard you.
This memo is just essentially a dictation of the conversations and the ideas from the
But in nicely summarized, thanks to Jacob. Yes.
Summarize, I wouldn't call it dictation.
Right, it's not a dictation.
I'm sorry. So I just to kind of clarify. So and because they're really spot on. All we're doing is making recommendations and trying to inform council of what the board is receiving, whether it's from the board members or from members of the public. So if they choose to make a change to the ordinance, they can take that information and then apply it to whatever process they go through, if they decide to make a change to the ordinance or not. So effectively here, all we're saying is we're trying to put a document together that allows the council to know what's been discussed in this body, right, wrong, or indifferent, agree or disagree, what the public has brought to us. And then the council would then still go through their process of if they choose to change the ordinance, which they may not. Many of the things that are in here are already reflected in the ordinance anyway. So they may choose to do nothing, but this is just an informative piece for them, so then they can take an action if they deem necessary.
Jared, did you have any follow-up?
A lot happened in last week. I missed last meeting.
You missed a big meeting.
Apparently everything that I completely disagree with made it into these exemptions and control.
Right, but know that these are that's why we also wanted to make sure that we gave you an opportunity to add things to this if you wanted to. I'm not going to let you delete stuff that other people said, because those still go in there, and that's the idea of putting all sort of the range of ideas in there. But to add to it, I think would be completely fair and well within your rights as a board member.
Well, I guess going through it really quickly, and I'd be opposed to 2 and 3 family, even owner occupied. You're setting a precedent. Why would some, if we're going to do a rent control to protect the residents and the renters in this town, why are we carving out special particular size buildings for residents, for residents? It doesn't make any sense to me, and frankly it sets a bad precedent, right? So if we say, oh well, this doesn't have to be in, but this does, then what justifies what gets in? I think we spoke at length about the rental increases, and we were going to come up with the CPI, which was we were gonna come up with the annual rent increase, and that, and what was used last year and the previous year. And then I remember there were many conversations, or you led the conversations about a reduction in that amount, and it looks like it made it in here. And I just do someone like myself, besides I'm okay, I'm all for rent control, the CPI, if it's from New York City or from Philadelphia or from a region around here, the way it's calculated. You know, my expenses on all my properties go up pretty much without, I don't even have to look at the books, 10 to 12% a year is what my expenses growth on all my properties, including real estate taxes from Highland Park, utilities, my payroll has gone up the same amount. So for 3%, 3.5%, while it even seems it underestimates what actually we're all experiencing in terms of inflation. And now it's in writing here, and it's one of the considerations for the board. We're going to reduce it to 2%. So into perpetuity, this is like rent growth. So if you look at it from any business, even in the municipal business, your top line is growing now into perpetuity at 2.5%, because now you also have a decontrol in, but we don't get a lot of turn. Our tenants stay for years and years and years and years. So our rent growth our revenues stay at 2.5, 3.5%. You're asking to go down to 2.5, 2.6. But my R&M costs for me to fix something, I looked the other day, it's doubled since 2019. So for me to fix a faucet, it's twice as expensive as it was 5-6 years ago, which is about 15% expense growth. So I just think the fact that now we have it in here for the council to vote on, I think that it should be made aware that, I'm here to represent the limits. I'm not here to complain. I actually, and I know I'm an emotional guy, and I sometimes wear my emotions on my sleeve, but it's really not sustainable if you're going to cap rent growth potentially at below 3% rent growth. But I don't see it, especially with the world where it is. I don't see expenses and inflation coming down. So what's going to happen to everybody that wants to operate something in this town? And you have double-digit expense growth. You have double-digit expense growth with 2 to 3% revenue growth. Eventually, nobody can do business in town. So that needs to be somehow considered and factored into the memo to the board.
Can we get those? So just to be clear, the exemptions so far, Jared would like it on there that no exemptions are made. And I would agree with Jared on this one too. This was just one that Diane had made for the rent increase calculation. I think that should all be noted. And if Derek, Jared, if you want to provide data on that as well, because I think we can also attach, I would like for us to attach the data that I shared about wage growth. So that's kind of where we got here, was average wage growth for Middlesex County was 0.5%. Right. So when inflation's at 4% and wage growth is at 0.5, you're thinking like, how do we get to where we're still turning a profit? We're thinking, how do renters still stay in their things? I think this is all something that they should consider, right? So I think sharing data on that would be really useful if we could.
But you're giving, right. And I have I'm sure you're right, but you're giving one data set. But who hasn't had a plumber come to their house, or an electrician, or done anything, and the costs are double what they were 3 years ago? They're not $40 more, they're double what they were. So I always hear all these administrations and these economic numbers say, oh, well, we've got inflation under control and wage growth is 0.5%, but I can't pay employees, and nobody can give them a flat flat income,
Right,
you know,
right.
and I'm sure the Rutgers, you guys are, some of you are employees at Rutgers and other places. I can't imagine you're getting 0.5%.
No, they try.
Okay, they don't get away with it. So, okay, and then the only other thing is, what I'd like in here is, I didn't realize this until I joined the council, was that there's a very negative connotation toward rent decontrol, which I've heard whispers around from different people in town, and I can't fight people's ideas or kind of their theories or ideologies on rent decontrol. But what I can do is, and this is why I kind of joined the board, is because I have a spectrum of knowledge from other towns and how they handle things. And many of the towns, and I think there's some language in our ordinance for this, but I'd like to tighten it, and I can go over it with anyone and share kind of my knowledge on it. And that's New York City does the same thing. When there's a vacancy decontrol, or several of the towns that I operate apartments in Bergen County, when there's a decontrol, the landlord can raise the rent if there's a vacant apartment, a percentage of the amount that they put into the apartment. So if I put in theory, if I put $100,000 into renovating an apartment, let's say there's a certain percent, let's say it's 10%, I can now raise the rent to $1,000 a month, or what, you know, and I'm generalizing. So I think if there is a consideration to modify or reduce vacancy decontrol, I think you probably want to also, and it benefits everyone, to incentivize landlords to put money back into the units to get to improve the buildings in the town in general and for the tenants. So having some structure where, or some ordinance where you can show the town based on the receipts and the bills you got for what you put into that unit to bring it to market, you can increase the rent from whatever it was by a certain percent based on the money you put into the unit. And that's many towns do it. New York City does it with because they have rent control, they have rent regulation. There's different levels in New York City. There's rent control, rent regulation, and there's fee control. But it's been effective in incentivizing landlords to put money into an apartment to rent it. If you take that off the table altogether, it's not beneficial. It won't. Landlords are going to have trouble putting money into buildings. So I don't know how we put that into the memo, but these are the kind of things that I'd like to. And I'm not trying to change anybody's view. I'm just trying to bring what I've learned from other towns and where there's been some success and where there has been, because it's always a give and take.
Did you get that too, Jacob? So for vacancy decontrol, considering some kind of alternate formula that includes that takes into account any expenditures on improvements at the time of vacancy, right? Is what you're saying, Jared?
Yeah, there's North Arlington does it. And I can
Yeah, if you want to send me some stuff.
yeah, I can send you some calculations that they use that we have to provide. So
Does anybody else have anything on the exemptions? I think we want to come back to, Diane had an amendment there, and then let's do these before we move on to the next one in case you have more, Jared. Anything on the, anything left to add under the exemptions, under rent increase calculation, or under the vacancy decontrol?
I just have a question.
Yeah,
if I
go
may.
ahead.
I'm sorry, so you talked about the decontrol, but then having it tied it into sort of improvements to the property. So there's the capital
improvements of the property, improvements of that particular
to that
apartment.
unit. And that kind of, I guess just to clarify, are we trying to find a connection between, there's the capital improvement section of your ordinance as well, which also says that if you put certain
They're
amount of
completely-
But that's at any time, not necessarily during.
Well, what I'm saying is that as we make recommendations to the board, we're trying to tie maybe one into the other, or maybe we need to clarify a little bit of the capital
I think you
improvement
keep them
projects to tie it
separate.
into decontrol versus having it as a separate
If you
section.
want to protect, if you want to protect it, not protect the town, so there's no ambiguity, which doesn't help me as a landlord, but I would tell you that separate them. So you have capital improvements for exterior roofs, windows,
Mhm.
and then you have a whole separate capital, not capital, but renovation budget and what you put into a particular unit that will benefit that tenant and what will justify a 7% increase or a 9% increase. Look, I gave you granite countertops and I put a beautiful shower in for you and it cost me $3,000. I
Mhm.
can get $75 more rent on this unit.
Have we historically not, like, if someone renovates an entire bathroom or a
We have
kitchen-
vacancy decontrol right now.
No, I'm asking for the, on the capital, on the
capital
capital section,
improvement.
has that not qualified them for capital improvement previously?
Go ahead, Jerry.
Aaron, we've had no experience with capital improvement surcharges, so.
Fair
we'll
enough.
just Stop there.
Fair enough, no,
So
that,
we have clauses
Yeah.
in our ordinance that Sapna had identified that needed tightening up regarding that section, that she had some ideas, so we'll loop back around. I think you might be taking us.
no, and I apologize, but that's why I'm asking, because as you're talking,
Yeah,
in
this
my
board
head,
has
I'm
not dealt
trying
with
to.
it, the borough has not dealt with it, it's in our ordinance, but it's kind of untested at this point. so.
Understood, that's why I've read, and again, I'm just kind of walking,
I
so I
know,
read your
you're
whole
reading-
ordinance and I'm
yeah.
reading the memo, so now I'm just trying to make
Yeah.
everything connect. So, okay, I get where you're coming from, but you see what I'm talking about. so.
Separate them from capital improvements to.
You're trying to
actual-
link improvements to incentivize these upgrades to a unit so that we're keeping our stock in good shape.
And it justifies
Justifies-
a certain, and you can sort of cap.
Sorry, I
Diane
jumped
first.
in there.
All right, Diane's next and then Lucinda.
Oh, well, I do want to respond to some of the things Jared said, that there are more expenses, taxes are higher, fees are higher. We pay,
Which one is this on? Which one are we speaking on?
on increases.
The rent increase, okay.
The fees for a CO are something like $150 now, where, they used to be like 25.
Yeah, you worked there, they were 100 or 25.
Yeah,
Order.
so fees are higher. I'm concerned that we won't be able to get materials in the future. We have like a pretty complicated economy right now. I really, the owner occupied 2-family and the 1-families that are rentals, they're not quite the same as a complex. If Jared needs a refrigerator, I'm guessing he probably has 3 or 4 in his, warehouse. If a 2-family needs a refrigerator, they have to start shopping and right away because they can't leave the tenant without, a necessary appliance. So that's about that. Although I totally think if you don't want to exempt anything, I'm not gonna, it's not a big deal for me. The other thing I'm concerned about is the lack of maintenance that can happen if people stop, if the rents are too low. So right now, Highland Park is surrounded by rental properties. Single-family homes are a little hole in the donut. All around us are garden apartments and rental properties. Cedar Lane, Carl's Road, River Road, all the way around us. If those properties are not well maintained, that means that little hole of single-family homes are going to be affected. I'm concerned that wouldn't be a good thing. I looked at other rental increases. Edison has a flat 5%, Piscataway 6%, and New Brunswick 3.14%. And there are immediate neighbors. Now, if we're going to be the place where rents are really low and maintenance is deferred, I don't know if that's in the best interest of the entire town.
Do we have examples where this is happening, where maintenance is being deferred because people aren't making enough based on the rent control ordinance that we have right now?
No, I don't have that.
Well, I told you that.
Go ahead, Lucinda. Sorry,
May I-
Lucinda's
may I-
next.
may I- may I say something? So, what Jared was talking about in terms of, instead of having vacancy decontrol, having a unit come up, doing whatever renovations need to be done, and there being a percentage increase, that's very different from just vacancy decontrol. And the reason I'm saying that's very different, because you just said, I don't know if this is true or not. You just said, oh, if that happened, I could see I would increase the rent maybe 7-9%. That 7 or 9% increase on that unit is very different than what happens when a unit is decontrolled for some people. So for example, in my case, if my apartment had just, it would have been an exorbitant increase. So there's a difference between, because if someone's lived there for a long time and then they leave, sometimes that increases 30%, 50%.
Sure.
But that's very different from what you just described being, oh, I've invested in renovations in this apartment and now I want to increase not 3.5%, but 7% or 9%. That's just very, very different from vacancy decontrol, which really forces people, it just makes some apartments completely unaffordable for, people.
Go ahead, Jared.
Well, there's also, you bring up a very good point, but there's also, and because I have this issue too, in other towns and even here where the rents are like, I have a building a couple towns over where the average rent's probably one bedroom is 1150, 1200, maybe on newer renovated units, 1300. But I have some tenants in there paying 400 a quarter. And so there becomes a problem with, even if that person eventually leaves, when you have decontrol, I can still put $150,000 of work in that unit and I only get $150 more for the unit. So it here's a good example. And I'm telling you, it decentivizes me for putting money. Because I won't put good money after that. So that, like, it's not, you want examples, but it's clear, it makes sense. And we're doing that rare. Like now we're building up a capital budget so we can do the roofs right here at Raritan Landing, which is down the street from here. It's 60 units and maybe by next year we'll have enough money to do the roofs, but every year it gets pushed out a little bit. And also, I'll tell you, there's 4 buildings there. Each roof costs about $35,000 to do. In 2019, when I did the roofs on the other side of town, same size, it was 19,000. So it's up 50% in 4 or 5 years. That's 10% growth a year. So now we're here to do a roof on a building. It's going up, the costs are going up 10% a year, double-digit increases. And somebody here is proposing a 2%, 2.5%, 2.6% top line increase. So now you want to cap the increases, but even Highland Park, okay? Highland Park had a tax reassessment on the commercial, on everybody, but we got hit pretty hard. Our taxes went up 50% since the last assessment. Okay, okay, and you say, okay, well, it's been 6 or 7 years or whatever it's been since the last reassessment, or maybe longer. But I also get my taxes go up 5-6% a year, just because I work in my own properties in town. So not only are my real estate taxes, which represent 30% of my expenses, okay, real estate taxes represent about 30% of fixed expenses on these buildings. That expense is going up 5% a year. And then I got hit with a reassessment, which was almost 50% increase. So my 30% of my expenses on my buildings is going up 12 to 13% a year. So now, and I'm here and I'm trying to work with you guys, but Highland Park has got me by both sides as a businessman in Highland Park. You're charging me 13% expenses on real estate taxes, and now you're capping me at 3.5%, maybe 2.5% on what I can make on my income.
Hold on, we got
Oh,
Terry
sorry.
first. And
Oh,
then
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mine can hold on.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you have a number in your head?
No, I will. Here's the story. I have met them. There's over half of, I think roughly half of the towns in New Jersey municipalities have rent control. I'm not arguing with rent control. I think it's fair. I think it's also fair that if you want to do decontrol, you give me a chance to increase the money, put money in my building, and I can raise the rents.
You mean vacancy control?
Vacancy decontrol.
We have decontrol now, which means you can raise it however you want. That's
Okay,
decontrol, vacancy control.
Vacancy, no, yeah, or whatever.
Okay.
I think if you want to use a number that we got from New York City or from Philadelphia that says, okay, on average, everything, you throw it into a pot, and we're finding out that the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, what it costs the average person is 3.5% a year. Okay, that's fair. But why are we then saying, okay, and Diane said something that made a lot of sense too. And why are we now going to be, okay, let's go down to 2.5%. Like it's like arbitrary. It's like, it's not even being the low cost provider. She's not wrong. Eventually, and I know you said you want proof, but proof.
No, I just said data helps.
Look at my emotions when I see that. I'm okay. Okay. I came here and agreed to be on the board, which I knew you guys were going to put rent control in and start enforcing it. And okay, 3.5% CPI, that's understandable. It's justified. That's what a lot of towns in New Jersey municipalities do. Okay. But like anything else, then it gets a little bit more, people try to squeeze more and more and more. And now we have a recommendation on here to go down to, there's a 2 in front of the rental increases. When is the last time anything in this country only went up 2%?
Terry, I'm gonna put you back on
Okay.
stack, and then I put myself on stack, and Lucinda, then
And
Stephanie. I just want a quick response, which what you're describing is exactly what it's like to be a renter and a consumer and a laborer, like right now as well. And so I'm feeling your pain also, all of us are. And so this is not suggesting, by the way, that it goes down to 2%. This is suggesting that it's a percentage of CPI. It doesn't have to be 75. That was just a number that we had seen in other rent control ordinances, to consider wage growth as well. And I understand that your profits are dropping as these profit. Hold on, let me finish, Jared. You have to let me finish. As costs are going up and your ability to raise those rents those are converging, and that's less and less profit. And also as wages are being sticky and prices are going up, that's less and less we have to spend. And what I'm suggesting is not even to split the difference with wages, but also not to split the difference with your profit, that we're both splitting the difference here in a way that you're still turning a profit, but also people can afford to live here. And that's behind this. I don't think it has to be 75%. And this doesn't mean that we're sticking it at 2%. This means that we're considering the fact that wages are sticky relative to price growth, and that we want something that is a percentage of that to reflect that acknowledgement, so that we don't displace our working class community. That's it. And so I understand the pain that you're describing right now, because we're all feeling it and what we have to pay for. And so that's the consideration that we're trying to put in here, is that we don't want to put our landlords out, but we also don't want to put all of our renters in our community out as well. And I'll put you back on stack because I can see you want to talk, but Terry was next if she wants it, then Lucinda, and then Stephanie.
Just really quickly, it's just going back to what you mentioned around the North Arlington, I'll call it, kind of approach to not full decontrol. One thing I know I read in that guidebook that we shared, the survey of towns in New Jersey who have rent control, is there are some places that also have kind of a 10-year or some kind of limit to basically address that situation. You mentioned that $400 a month tenant that you've been with for 20 years, they leave, it would be full decontrol at that point, because they've been there so long. It would be a chance to really get the equilibrium back. So we will happily, and what I was just gonna offer is, you sound, every time you point and you go, and you added this, and you're just like, part of it was you just weren't here, because your points would have been in there too, and so we'll certainly add in some of this feedback. And again, this is just considerations for the governing body at this point, so having this perspective is helpful. So I just want to remind you, it's not like set in stone, any of this, it's just, but these were good and thoughtful points that were raised that we wanted them to be aware
We're
of.
sending both, Jared. We're
Yeah.
sending my suggestion and
Exactly.
yours. They'll both go in.
And Stephanie's here and she's hearing all this.
Yeah, also Stephanie's here. Lucinda, and then.
Yeah. Jerry said, I was gonna say, Jerry, you have your opportunity, it's gonna go in here, you know, 'cause it's not like. it's
Jacob's
not
got all
going
this.
to. So,
Nailed it.
Yeah, thank you. Stephanie.
I just wanted to as well remind everyone that we do vote on every year the CPI. So if one year it's 3 and then the year is 5, you know, that's you recommend that every year to council, and then that's another, you know, discussion, and then we vote on that. So that's an annual, it could
It's not set.
change. Yeah, it's not like for the next 5 years. You know, council could take in consideration everything that's going on nationally, tariffs, this, that, blah, 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 what's going on, and say, hey, maybe we want to change and maybe we don't want to take rent control. So, you know, all of that being said, nothing is set in stone with the CPI as well. And also taking in consideration what you said, right? We also control the budget, right? So what we went up this year, we also, you know, with the code enforcement fees, you know, I did ask that portfolio to kind of look at those fees and too, but yeah, you're right on that part, so.
Others on those first 3 items. Diane, did you get yours in there, your amendment? Are we just gonna change that, I guess, since this is kind of a working document right now? So you have Diane's amendment to the minutes are gonna be reflected in.
Yeah, the
memo?
minutes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we have that in. We have a few more categories of things. We have the just and fair return. Jared, we had a closed session on this, executive session, and this is what came out of it. So this is what you've already seen before, I think. The role of the
I found
administrator.
the typo, by the way.
The role of the borough administrator too. This is one that has to be changed, I think, right?
Yeah,
This is
that's
like,
one that our attorney had said is wrong, that we have to fix, and there's an inconsistency.
it's not Terry's job to do.
It's inappropriate for
Yeah.
me to mitigate, to be intervening in those harassment
This
complaints.
is a court
It's
issue,
court's issue. And it's correct in one portion of the ordinance and it's incorrect in another.
I say, I think in the ordinance, it says specifically you have no role in that.
But there's
And
another
there's another
section
part
that
that
it
says that
does,
it's all
and
the
so
law.
we want to go with the other way.
We need to harmonize that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
between
that's,
the
I just, this was also just, some of these things were not controversial, but we just figured, let's just put it all in one place.
And then, so if anybody, does anyone have any, Jared, looking at you specifically, but anybody else that wants to add? So under just and fair return, the role of the borough administrator or the capital improvement surcharge, those last 3 items, do we have any comments on those? Jared, anything you want to add in or anything anybody else wants to amend or add at this point? See none? Oh,
Sorry,
Almost.
I see 2 different points there on the, where it says that obviously something had made recommendations as to adding detail or definitions or whatever.
which section are you on?
Well, I see it on capital improvements, but I also saw it on the just and fair return to put a definition in it and so on and so forth. At some point, I mean, I'm happy to propose any kind of language or definitions that you all want, but it may, as we talked about capital improvements earlier, and that's why I brought it up, was some of the things that were being discussed in my mind were capital improvements that may have been rectified under a different portion of your ordinance that wouldn't, and so as we talk about, whether, we want to allow people to re-rent and go back to market rates, those capital improvements may allow them to get the surcharges that kind of close that gap too. We should probably at some point discuss what we want to constitute as a capital improvement versus just a renovation that should just be done on a regular basis. Do things like a refrigerator, for example, is that a capital improvement or a roof or whatever? Just my suggestion.
I think that's what we're asking the council to do is come up with those definitions.
It'll become the attorney's job to figure that out.
Yeah.
No, and that's fine.
Gonna be your
I-
job, but when it goes to that committee.
Yeah, but as I talk to all of you, it's helpful to, because the council's gonna, I'm sure at some point it's gonna say, well, what did we want to improve? Like, what was the set of recommendations to include in that definition? Just, I wanted to throw it out there as we may want to have an idea to give, if the council requests it, what we believe should be a capital improvement versus maybe something that would go to a fair and just, or something that you should just renovate on a regular basis.
Jared, go ahead.
I mean, I can solve that very easily for you. Capital improvement is kind of what an accounting term for it means. It's
Can you speak
capital.
up, Jared? I can't hear you.
Capital improvement in the world of accounting and finance means a capitalized improvement means it can be depreciated over time. Okay, whereas ongoing cost to renovate a unit or put a refrigerator in or tile a bathroom is not a capital. So a capital improvement is something that loses value over time, like a boiler or a roof or something that you put a one-time cost and then you depreciate it, but it's capitalized. So then that's an accounting term.
No, and I understand that. My only recommendation was if there are specific things that we want to say, we're going to constitute these as capital improvements, just to clarify for the ordinance so everyone understood if we write this definition, that may be something more, or I can do it generically where we go the generic accounting role. And then the only issue with that is that some, a landlord comes and says, okay, I'm going to apply for a capital improvement hardship. And then they have to now justify what they've done. And if it's not specific, if there was something that, hey, it's a physical, we repaired the roof. Well, under your ordinance, this is specifically listed as a capital improvement. You know what I'm saying? It might just streamline the process for everybody. Just a recommendation, but.
I think that was our goal, I think,
Yeah.
of defining it right. Go
Yeah,
ahead, Kenny.
I think that was the hope, was to take input from the attorney's office as to what kind of works to make it as easy to administer
Sure.
and as transparent for everybody as what qualifies.
We'll start to work on some of that language then for you all, just to have it ready.
We work on that application too, right?
Yeah, and there's an application that needs to be updated as well.
That's not our job.
Fair enough.
That's why I was saying this body isn't gonna know.
I think
what
you're
to-
opening a can of worms by.
Lucinda,
So under just in fair rate of return, it says that if you set it 2.5% the minimum, that is not what the recommendation was. So we just need to look at wasn't it 2.5% above the PAT? Sorry.
I remember what you're saying, but I
You know what
don't
I'm talking
remember.
about? I know I kept saying that.
No,
right,
no.
but-
Above the
No.
possible.
yeah, adjust, the return is 2.5%, when the return means the above and return are the same thing.
But
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
Fill it out in that memo then. It's two and a,
Yeah,
it looks
I could
to
see
me,
it.
it looks like it's a 2.5.
You'll see.
No, I know what you're saying. I'll make sure it's the last. Yep.
Yeah.
I know.
And again, that's one that our attorney is gonna help us massage. But I think I remember what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. Yeah. Sure.
Jacob's gonna get it in there.
Yeah.
Any other, before we go to public comment, are we adding in what Jared's gonna put there? So Jacob, you're gonna give us an updated version of this and we'll let Jared take a look at it before it gets transmitted. I don't think that we necessarily, do we need to vote on this? Terry, go ahead.
I was gonna suggest the next version of this will be
And then
a memo from the rent control board to the Stephanie's finance committee. So you'll see that'll be the main change, and then with the addition of the feedback we just got.
Okay.
And then we'll circulate that around, but I don't believe that requires a vote. This is there's just. a general-
Especially because we're not having to come to a consensus, as long as nobody has any corrections. So please, everybody, look for that so that if there are any corrections that need to be made on your own part, not on what other people
Ones that
say.
you care about, that you
Right.
voiced.
I'm not gonna
We didn't
correct what
get it.
Jared said. Jared said what he said. He needs to look at what he said and make sure that it gets in there, right? Stephanie. And then Aaron.
And then it's going to go to my finance committee, but once it goes to a work session, that will be open and all council members will discuss. And I will let you guys know when that is on the agenda and happening. You guys are free to come and speak, or free to send emails, then you'll be able to hear from the entire council, because my committee alone isn't able to make just a decision.
Aaron.
My only comment was gonna be that it's still a draft document. You don't need to go to motion and adopt it perpetually. Once it's done and you want to make a formal adoption, but to your point, you don't need to do it over and over and over again. It should be.
All right, any other last comments on this memo before we move to public comment? All right, moving on to public comment. We have members of the public here. Do we have any online? None online. Would anyone here like to make public comment? Come on up. State your name for the record.
It's working. Can you tap it? Just make sure it's working.
Hello, I'm Kate Stevens. I rent on Wayne Street, and I have for a while now. There's a couple things I wanted to mention. One, I thought that a lot of the sort of discussion towards adding in flexibility towards being able to discuss how the CPI and therefore judging the rent increase was the amendments were wanted because the board at the last time we certified the rent increase, they felt that there was not any flexibility for there to be discussion of can we add in this type of percentage change, but that it was felt like it was locked in, that it must be an average between Philly and New York. And that was, I believe, discussed at the December meeting or whenever it was. And so the amendments are something like that are being proposed here are something that is relevant and important because the current wording didn't seem to leave much movement for that type of flexibility and consideration of active environment about how prices were moving around, right? So there wasn't the ability to respond to current economic affairs. Additionally, there was a mention about Rutgers wages, and I just wanted to clarify some things, is that Rutgers includes many different types of wage. Simply being a professor is not there are many different types of professors, and that doesn't mean that it's an affluent job. Tenured professors, sure. But grad students, adjunct professors, non-tenured track professors, I am not able to individually negotiate my wages because we have a fantastic union. However, 2 contract negotiation cycles ago, my wages were not increased at all, right? I had a period where I was paid $25,000 and that's it, 4 years in a row, right? There were no increases. And for certain parts of that time, I am not allowed to take additional work. And as we have discussed, percentages of small amounts of money increase is not, right, a large increase. My wages now are about $34,000 a year. And that's after some very significant increases, including going on strike. And I don't think that is going to necessarily be an easy, right, negotiation every single time contract negotiations go up. I am not able to increase my wages in any specific way. Additionally, there have been ways that landlords are getting around rent cap increases. For example, partially due to the enormous drama of the new water meters and the various ways that measurements have been incorrect and the town has been unwilling to sort of remedy them in swiftness. I now pay my water bill as well. So I pay rent, I pay water, I pay heat. Water used to be included in my rent bill, it is no longer. Which, you know, is a quarterly payment of about, I don't know, it's prorated between all of the people in my 2-apartment building. But you know, it's $140 a quarter, which is not nothing, especially as we've discussed, all prices are going up. So I bring up the Rutgers wages because that is an ecosystem that we are part of. And people need to live, grad students need to live, and grad students also need dignity in their living conditions. We're adults, we're people with lives and jobs and pets, and if things keep going up and amenities continue to be taken away, that's degrading for people who live here and are part of the community and want to be part of the community and live here and be part of this town. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Any others? Not online? Oh, hold on. All right, see no more waiting for public comment. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a second.
I want
Aye.
to, before we adjourn, I want to spend 2 seconds.
Jared, all right.
It's gonna drive you crazy, but
Technically already been a motion to adjourn, but I'm gonna let you
Thank you.
backtrack for 30 seconds. We'll
I know
disobey Robert's
I
rules
sound
here.
like a pain in the side of you and other people here.
I like when you come, Jared.
But I came on the board because somebody wanted a landlord's perspective. And I could come, and every time I hear an idea like this that is going to really hurt the way I do business, I could get upset and just do this, but I try to rationally, I come in with my armor on, trying to give you what the landlord perspective on it is and how it actually directly impacts a landlord, rather than emotionally say it's gonna, I try to look at it unbiasedly, but from my day-to-day business and how I do business and what would impact how much money I put into a particular unit, when I would do a roof, when I would make the landscaping pretty, when I would redo some concrete, what I would try to do. And so I already know this is a funny way to look. I already know I lost the battle when rent control went in. So what I wanted to do was give it a very kind of, and it's going to be biased because it's coming from the landlord's perspective, but I wanted to give you a perspective on somebody that has a bunch of units in town, so you can see what each ordinance and what little exemption is, how it really will truly, without trying to put emotion or bias in it, how it will impact things going forward. I'll stay on as long as I feel like that you're listening to it and that I'm making a slight, at least making people think about it before they decide to put 2 or 1 or 2% rent growth or get rid of the control or just stuff like that. And until I can feel like I'm at least letting you think about it before you come. I get it. I understand what the resident said about Rutgers and she's a grad student and sorry about that. They's a grad student and on a very tight budget. I get all that. But it's not, the problem is it's not about one person. I hear so many different things every day. Yeah, we have to, when we make these decisions, we have to make it an aggregate, and it has to be a compromise to make sure the residents and the renters in town are protected and regulated, and the landlords are too. But you don't have to make it a screaming home run for the landlords, but you have to make it so they can operate and want to be in town, or at least be able to operate in town. And just like for everybody else, my job gets, I'm not lying, but it gets harder and harder and harder every year. And I'm not lying when I say with 15% expense growth, and apartments have, you can look them up online, margins on multifamily units is tight. If you cap it at 2 or 3% the revenue growth, and you continue to grow expenses above double digits, you may not affect it now, but in 3 years, you're not going to be able to attract anybody to put any money into the buildings. And that's all I have to say.
Jared, I want to tell you that even though you and I disagree about a lot, I think we do so well. And I think that I speak for everyone, I say that we all value everyone's opinions here, including yours. And we appreciate your participation in this board. Now, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
See no objection, meeting adjourned. All right.